Call the meeting to order. Supervisor Wells, would you lead us in the invocation, please, sir?
Yes, sir. Let's bow our heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we ask your blessings on our county, our country, and our nation. We ask your blessings on those folks who serve our countries and our counties and our states in services, armed services, fire services, police services. We ask your blessings on our school children and all of our citizens in Frederick County as we meet tonight and decide decisions that will do good things for our county. Guide and direct us, hold our hand, and lead us in the path that you would want us to go with you. We ask in Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Vice Chairman Lofton, you lead us in the pledge, please, sir.
Would you stand, face the flag, and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Adoption of the agenda. Are there any proposed changes?
Staff has none, Mr. Chairman.
All right. How would the board like to handle the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of the agenda as presented.
Second.
In a second, any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We'll adopt the agenda as presented. The citizen comments, agenda items that are not subject to public hearing. Did anyone sign up?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman, no one signed up.
Thank you, sir. Consent agenda. How would the board like to handle that?
Mr. Chairman, I would move for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A second. Is there any discussion? Supervisor McCarthy.
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter.
Aye.
Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn.
Aye.
Supervisor Trout.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries. All right. That will bring us to Board of Supervisors comments. Are there any? Hearing none. County officials. Selection of name for a ball field complex on Stevenson Road. Who has this one?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion for the selection of the ball field complex on Stevenson Road to be named Stonewall Park.
So you've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Is there discussion? Anyone? Supervisor McCarthy.
Aye.
Supervisor Slaughter.
Aye.
Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn.
Aye.
Supervisor Trout.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. And the new name of the ballpark will be Stonewall Park. Thank you very much. Certainly appreciate staff's hard work and the commission's advice. Budget transfers, committee business, none. Public hearing, amendment to fiscal year 1920 budget.
Mr. Chairman, as I'm sure the board will recall, as part of our budget deliberations this past year, the board established a capital fund and a policy whereby funds in excess of 20% of our budgeted amount would be moved into a capital fund. For this year, that amount ends up being $4,504,420. So the public hearing is to authorize the movement of these funds in accordance with the policy, and because of the dollar amount, it requires a public hearing.
All right, so questions of staff, anyone? All right, this is a public hearing. Would anyone like to speak concerning this budget amendment to transfer into capital from the general fund? Anyone at all? Last call. Close the public hearing portion. How would the board like to handle this one?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to reflect the general fund and county capital fund supplemental appropriation in the amount of $4,504,520 to represent the general fund balance in excess of 20% be transferred to the capital fund.
Second.
And the second, is there any discussion? Anyone? Supervisor Trout?
Aye.
Supervisor Dunn?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor Wells? Supervisor Slaughter?
Aye.
Supervisor McCarthy?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries. All right. Planning Commission, other discussion of landscaping buffer screening and off-street parking. Ms. Klein?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Supervisors. This is a proposed amendment to Chapter 165, the zoning ordinance, to clean up inconsistencies with certain sections and to clarify or reduce requirements for certain uses. The zoning ordinance sections amended include storage facilities, self-storage, tractor truck and tractor trailer truck parking, special event facilities, off-street parking and parking lots, landscaping requirements, and buffer and screening requirements. And I'll walk you through each of those changes. The first item is storage facilities, self-storage. The proposed changes correct landscaping and planting inconsistencies regarding plant size in this section with other sections of the zoning ordinance, and it modifies the requirements for the screening of the use. For tractor truck and tractor trailer truck parking, the proposed changes prevents the siting of the above use adjacent to residential uses while enabling the location of these types of facilities where they are most appropriate, i.e. adjacent to major roadways and/or in the vicinity of other business and industrial uses. It also provides a consistent hard surface standard, gravel parking, that is consistent with the temporary nature of the use. It also corrects inconsistencies with the section planting requirements with other sections of the zoning ordinance. For special event facilities, the proposed change provide clarity with certain practices in the county, specifically that the building official with the Department of Building Inspections is responsible for determining if a building or structure existing or to be constructed is agriculturally exempt from the Virginia Building Code requirements, or if a separate building permit will be required for that structure. In regards to off-street parking and parking lots, the proposed change corrects inconsistencies with the required width of driveways serving parking lots in this section with other sections of the zoning and subdivision ordinance and the county code, specifically the fire code requirements. In regards to landscaping requirements, the proposed change corrects inconsistencies with plant size in this section with other sections of the zoning ordinance, and further clarifies requirements to prohibit plantings from being located within utility easements and eliminates certain plant species. And finally, with regards to our buffer and screening requirements, the proposed change modifies what activities are allowed in the inactive and active distance buffers. It modifies the landscape screen planting requirements, amends the requirements for buffers where the land to be developed is adjacent to a state road right-of-way with a designated functional classification of interstate, arterial, or collector roadway, and amends what zoning districts are allowed to request a reduced buffer distance if certain requirements are met. The Development Review and Regulations Committee discussed this item at their July 25th, August 22nd, and September 26th regular meetings, and the committee was generally supportive of those proposed changes. The Planning Commission discussed this item on October the 2nd, and this item is presented to you all this evening for discussion. Staff is seeking direction from the Board of Supervisors as to whether this item is ready to be sent forward to a public hearing, and staff is available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Questions? Supervisor Lofton?
Mr. Klein, I noticed in the Planning Commission's comments, and my comment also, under tractor, truck, and trailer parking, they recommended the removal of the temporary nature of the use, and I see that is still here. What do we mean by the temporary nature? Is there a limit on the amount of time that these can be utilized?
We did not provide a definition for the time frame. The Planning Commission believed that the inclusion of that statement that the uses may be temporary was too inexact and should be removed from the text amendment. So that's what we did with
I
it.
believe it was that they were, it's just not contributing anything to
Yeah, I agree
to
with
the
that,
ordinance,
yeah.
and we should
Okay.
do away with it.
And that was removed from the attachment that was included with your packet.
Other questions, anyone?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Supervisor?
Mr. Klein, the section 165 buffer and screening requirement, where we're striking through active buffers shall not contain rights-of-way, what is the thinking behind allowing rights-of-way versus not allowing them in the active buffer?
Take a look. Let me just pull that section up. Your sorry, your
two.
question was in regards to the active buffer and the inactive buffer?
Section A, paragraph 2. The current requirement is that the active buffers will not contain road rights-of-way, but we're striking that. What's the thinking behind
Correct.
striking that?
We already allow other activities in the right-of-way. We allow parking, driveways for parking, trails, and other recreational amenities. So it was an effort to be consistent with the fact that we're already allowing activities as part of as part of the active buffer, and road rights-of-way are servicing the use, but they're not the primary use. And I think the intent of that section in regards to the inactive and active buffer is to prevent primary use activities from being located within them.
Good, thank you.
Other questions of Mr. Klein? Supervisor Lofton?
To another question. You say the facility should not be located adjacent to residential uses. Generally, what would be the buffer between the tractor-trailer parking and residential uses?
I don't know off the top of my head. I believe it's a Category C type buffer, but there is a significant distance between business and industrial uses and adjacent residential uses, anywhere from 50 to 200 feet, depending on the type of screening that is provided.
So it could just be a matter of screening. I was thinking maybe there'd be another zoning use in between the residential and the tractor-trailer parking, but it could be just buffers that separate the residential from the tractor-trailer parking.
No, I believe the intent is that we wouldn't locate tractor-trailer truck parking immediately adjacent to a property that was zoned for residential, whether that's a rural piece of property that has an existing residential use or property that is zoned for residential uses.
So if this is enacted, it's a future look at this. It doesn't affect any existing facilities like this, because there are some existing facilities like this.
Correct. It would only apply to new applications for tractor-trailer truck parking. It would not retroactively impose a standard on those that already exist.
Was there any thought to make it a paved surface, even if it's prime and seal, or tar and chip, as some people call it, as opposed to gravel surfaces? Because the weight of those tractors and trailers and trucks seem to tend to take gravel to dirt real fast. So
The current standard is a hard surface. In this case, it'd be asphalt or concrete. Given that the use is considered a temporary or interim type use where there may be tractor-trailer parking now, but in the future, a higher and better use may locate on that site, installing a temporary surface such as gravel was easier to clear the site for a permanent use as opposed to tearing up asphalt or concrete. And as I understand it from some of the operators of tractor-trailer truck parking facilities, asphalt surfaces are susceptible to the tractor wheels and legs sinking in when it's very hot, so they'd have to do a concrete surface as opposed to asphalt, and there's an expense there.
okay, thank you.
Other questions? Supervisor Dunn?
Mr. Klein, in the conversation I had with Mike Freddy earlier, my impression was that you would not have this type of parking adjacent to a residential facility. Or maybe I had the conversation with you, I'm not quite sure. But with Mr. Lofton's comment, you're implying that it's adjacent. I thought it was not adjacent.
He's talking about existing tractor-trailer truck parking facilities that may already be adjacent to a residential use, but the purpose of this amendment is to prohibit that in the future so that they would not be located adjacent to a residential use.
Okay, and then, so the follow-up question is, then, as Mr. Lofton said, what type of designation, if you will, is between a residential use and this? Is there a designation that is defined, and how is it?
It would be prohibited. Currently, we require a type of buffer depending on what the zoning of the site where it's being located is versus the residential use, but that would,
With a different buffer, with a different land designation. I'm asking this as a question.
I apologize, I don't understand your question necessarily.
Let me try. I mean, it's only an allowed use in B3, OM, M1, M2 zoning districts,
Okay,
which can't be,
okay.
I mean, it's not that it can't be adjacent to residential, but the buffers have to be in place, distance and plantings,
All right. Thank you.
according to the table that's in the ordinance. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Further questions? Anyone? Just one. On page 7 of 7, under 6, paragraph C. Last sentence. Trees minimum 6 feet and 8 feet center to center. Doesn't seem to be consistent with the changes in other paragraphs earlier on in that section. And the verbiage is not consistent either. Was that supposed to be 4 and 12?
I believe you are correct, sir. When we formatted the changes that were proposed by the applicant, I believe that it should be 4 feet and 12 feet, but the changes might not have carried over, so we will make sure that that amendment is included when it goes to public
You might
hearing.
want to look at the verbiage, the description of feet center to center, or what you used earlier, just for consistency's sake.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further questions, anyone? So the question is it ready to go forward to public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, I have a move that we move this on to public hearing.
Adopt the resolution to
I'm
forward
sorry,
it?
adopt the
Thank you.
resolution forward to public hearing.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We'll forward that one to public hearing. Brings us to 12B, telecommunications.
Yes, sir, this is also an ordinance amendment discussion, and the purpose of the proposed amendment to Chapter 165, the zoning ordinance, is to enable smaller commercial telecommunication facilities in certain zoning districts by right, to codify changes enacted by state code, creating a two-track process for the approval of telecommunication facilities, and to enable communication facilities by right in the OM, office and manufacturing, and HE, higher education zoning districts. The changes to the telecommunication facilities section are wholesale and includes new definitions and changes to the additional regulations for specific uses outlined in 165-204-19. The two-track process enables administrative review eligible projects. These are small cell facilities, structures under 50 feet in height, or co-location on existing telecommunication structures. And these administrative review eligible projects would be permitted in all zoning districts, and they would be reviewed administratively by staff. It also creates a standard process projects. These are the ones you all are currently familiar with, which is going to be your telecommunication monopoles and towers in excess of 50 feet. And these would continue to be reviewed under the conditional use permit process, which would require public hearings before the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors before they could be approved and cited. This item was proposed by the county attorney and staff, and the Development Review and Regulations Committee discussed this item at their September 25th regular meeting, and the DRRC was supportive of the proposed changes. The Planning Commission also discussed this item on October the 2nd, and this item is presented to you all this evening for discussion. Staff is seeking direction from the Board of Supervisors as to whether this item is ready to be sent forward to a public hearing, and staff is available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Questions of Mr. Klein, anyone?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Dunn.
Had a conversation with Mr. Williams, and I just want to make certain I'm sure that the by right is required by state law, and that's making it consistent with state law, correct, Mr. Williams?
That is correct.
So therefore, the county cannot really change that by right. That's part of this overview, correct? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Klein, This, I think, was brought to the county attorney's attention by Supervisor Lofton and myself as one of the things that we really wanted to see to aid those out in our areas of the county. I applaud you for coming up with this. I've been talking with a couple of the WISP providers in the area, and one of the main concerns is that a 50-foot pole may not be tall enough in areas like Gainsborough and Back Creek, where we have hollows and mountains and that type of thing, and tall trees that can be over 50 feet tall. Have we looked at any other localities like Clark County that recently passed a similar ordinance to see how they've dealt with those things?
I did not. I figured at this point I'd give you the base ordinance, and obviously if the board wants that explored further and ultimately wants to look at a larger number, that would be the board's prerogative. We can certainly look.
Okay, so there wasn't anything that caused you all to say, let's not do that? It was just
This was
at this
the
stage?
state law
Okay, great.
default, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Supervisor Lofton.
To follow up on Supervisor McCarthy's comments there and questions, I too have been talking to some of the WISP providers, internet providers. I don't know, the 50 feet, the 50 feet is can the county exceed that 50 feet if we so desire?
The county can enable any height it wants. It has to allow the minimum of 50, but if the the board decides that it wants it to be 2,000, then that's the board's prerogative,
Okay, because I think,
or any number in between.
I like this change because I think it helps us, but I don't believe it's going to help us enough to get the broadband and the internet service to those under and unserved areas in the county the way it's currently structured. But thank Mr. Williams for taking the opportunity to bring it up to speed and bring us in compliance, potential compliance with the state. But I think there's going to have to be some changes made here, but I'd like to see it go to public hearing so we can get some more input on this. And I'll continue talking to others in that field to find out exactly what, because as Supervisor McCarthy has said, the biggest thing I'm hearing is trees. And trees can grow to 80 feet tall. So if 50 feet, unless you've got a specific band frequency that you can use, it's going to make it tough to help expand their broadband services out there. But I'm okay letting it go to public hearing. I think we need a little more input on this. And thank you for your work on this.
I might just comment that it's not that they can't go larger, they're just going to have to use the CUP process. I mean, I understand what your concern is and don't disagree. They can still go larger, they just have to use the CUP process.
Right, but I'd like to see if we couldn't,
Somewhere between.
yes,
Okay.
get us a little closer to without having to go into CUP.
Supervisor Dunn.
On the height issue, I'm probably more comfortable with the 50 feet with the option of going higher on a case-by-case basis. In a more densely area, a 2,000-foot, the example would be inappropriate. In a rural area, it might be appropriate. So I'd probably be more interested in something along the 50-foot line as a mandated with the option to go higher on a case-by-case basis. And I'd also like to make certain that citizens that are affected by this have the opportunity to come and hear that. I'd like to hear the input from people that are directly affected, and if the press can go and, advertise that there's going to be a public hearing, a planning commission public hearing here, so we can get that input, or contacting us individually. That'd be helpful in the thought process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other comments? Supervisor McCarthy.
More of a question to the county attorney. Can this board designate certain areas of the county with different height requirements? So, in the east side where it's less mountainous, you may not want to have as high, but out west,
Absolutely.
we certainly would need something, I think, a little bit higher than the 50 feet. Okay, that's
You could
helpful.
either use existing zoning districts, or you could use geographic areas. Obviously, if you use geographic areas, then there's the challenge of defining them. But
Right.
just say Interstate 81, east-west, whatever.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Anyone? Are we ready to send it forward?
So moved.
Okay. Motion to adopt the resolution, send it forward to public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Is there any discussion? Anyone? All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
No.
One no. We'll send it forward to public hearing. All right. That'll bring us to board liaison reports. Are there any? Hearing none, this is the opportunity that we reserve for citizens to comment on any issue they might like to bring before the board. Would anyone like to comment on any subject? Anyone? Seeing no one, we'll close the citizen comment portion. Board of Supervisors comments, are there any?
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Dunn.
I have 3 comments to make. One, in Greenwood, there's a convenience store that was considered to be the best convenience store in the county, Greenwood Convenience, that's shutting down at Sensitive and Greenwood, so congratulations to the owners of that operation. And secondly, we've talked a lot about education. In the last month, we've found out that the school board all the schools in Frederick County have been accredited, so Dr. Savine, good job. In addition, the high school graduation rate has been exceptionally high. Same situation to the school teachers, good job. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Other comments, anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the board comment portion. Vice Chairman Lofton.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, is there a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion? All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. We'll stand adjourned. We thank everyone for their time, attention, and
30 seconds.
participation.
It's a record. I do too.